Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another exclusive session webinar from E2 Workforce Consulting. My name is Dzulfadhli bin Lamin, and together with me, I have Victor Khan, both of us consultants from E2, and today we have customized and designed a discussion topic that I feel many of us are navigating at the moment. We all understand the obvious thing that's happening with the geographical issue with Iran has affected the whole economy, which many businesses are now considering, I would say suffering, or more towards considering to manage the business in times of fuel costs, pressure of the operation, pressure of demand, logistics, so on and so forth, and all the troublesome decisions that come follows. So Victor, how are we going to do today's session?
This is a big topic, right? I think we have, can everybody hear us? Maybe just hit us a comment and just say hello. Otherwise, it feels like I'm talking to Zol only. Good to be back. I haven't been doing this for a while, but today's topic especially, that got us thinking, Zol, when we were getting a lot of questions related to right sizing, cost cutting. That led us to think whether, our company is really navigating around this space at the moment. And then when reality starts to hit us with the fuel prices rising, diesel prices rising, and then the government also announcing recommendations to work from home, we thought piecing this topic together would be very, very relevant. So today we call this topic cost pressure to workforce strategy, managing employment in an economic crisis. I don't know whether we are in an economic crisis yet, but I'm sure many of you are thinking about this topic at the back of your heads. So since this topic is large, we don't want to come in and talk about here's how you retrench people, here's how you do cost-cutting exercises. So we thought we're going to start with Q&As, right? So we've prepared sort of like mini subtopics. We've prepared 9 or 10 questions, which hopefully would be able to cover most of the points that you guys are keen to listen. Now, the first topic for me, and I think we have a poll. We tried to create a poll here for everyone, yeah? We tried to create a poll, so all of you can also participate. The first topic that I want to talk about today is a work from home and flexible work arrangement. This has been hitting the news day in, day out. Now, before we start getting into this subject matter, we have a poll up on your screen, all right? We'd like to hear your thoughts, guys. What is your company doing towards this? Have you implemented work from home? Are you doing any other cost-cutting measures, or are you still figuring it out? Share with us your thoughts. I think you can type 1, 2, or 3 in your comment section, and the results will show. Yeah. While you are doing that, Zol, my first question today, and hopefully you can answer this, is whether work from home is mandatory for the private sector employees. We have issued a circular, I think 2 weeks back, pertaining to this subject matter. Has there been any development within this space?
Okay, so what we all know at the moment is Prime Minister have made an announcement that mentions public sector to be entitled for working from home. So we also know at the moment that it starts today. So if you're wondering, if you can see my slide here, the announcement came in 1st April by the Prime Minister. It kind of stirred the pot, I would say, because private sectors would also want to know what's going to happen. So far as we know, up until today, it only governs for pejabat awam, which means public sector. And those under public sector would also have its own requirements. For example, there's now an app called SpotMe, SPOTME. That's a structured way of how the government wants to measure performances, contribution, and whether or not the working from home is not abused.
Tell us a bit more about SpotMe, though.
Okay, this is interesting. Every now and then, the employees or the government employee have to inform the government, let me say the department.
The employer lah.
Employer lah. Employer is the government, right? In the government. So they have to update the government every now and then about their whereabouts, the location of their working. And if I'm not wrong, for certain sectors, about every half an hour, they have to update the app. Now, this could be something in the future, I would say, that the monitoring of employees remotely, and something that we have been hearing in the past. I'm very excited to see how it works for the public sector. Baru hari ini kita cuba. Now the question
we always receive is it now also to the private sector? The answer is no. It's not mandatory for the private sector. So far, what I can say, it's only an encouragement So instead of calling it mandate of law, I would call it as a structured dialogue. This is where they would want the employer and employee to have discussions whether or not it's possible. Now, the economy affects everybody, not just the government sector. So we must also look into considerations that works for us. There are also some questions on what was introduced in Employment Act during COVID. And for this, I would like to specify Section 60P and 60Q, where the Employment Act now includes provisions to mention what is work flexible work arrangement, and also work from home. This is where they define companies can now arrange for staggered working hours, working days, and also working location. The misconception of this section is people would assume it is mandatory and obligatory. Salah, just to clarify here. Like I said, it's only a dialogue, which means employee now have the right to request, and employer have an obligation to answer to the request. Cannot ignore or cannot just simply disregard it. So Section 60Q mentioned that the application process has a timeline, and the way we reply also there's a method, which is by way of writing. Now, all in all, I would like to conclude it's not mandatory. If you want to have a guideline, it starts from the Employment Act. So can we find anything else in the Employment Act that mentions on policy drafting? Tak ada. That one purely for company to assess what works well for your business.
I think for this, if I chip in as well, this section has been in place for quite some time. It's not a new section that has recently been implemented. But with the sensitivities going around the space of public sector getting work from home, I think there is also a misconception that employees can sometimes take this as a benefit. You know, if public sector employees can work from home, then why can't I work
Correct.
from home? So there are pressures, I would say inevitably, there are pressures faced by employers for the implementation of work from home. Now, it's important to realize that the Act says only optional, right? But I feel that with the sensitivities around this subject matter at the moment, your rejection might be scrutinized more than ever.
It can be non-compliant even if you ignore it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. So rule number 1 is you must reply within 60 days in writing. And if you are rejecting, you need to provide good reasons.
Yes.
What are some good reasons?
First, we can look into the nature of the business, whether or not the business is capable to provide you such work from home. For example, if your operation is with machines, you can't bring the machines home. If your operations is in regards of servicing patients, individuals who require intensive care, these are not type of roles that can be provided for work from home. Even if you look at the pelaksanaan work from home by the government, there are sectors that are not included within it. For example, the PDRM. It doesn't make sense, police kerja from home, right? They can even make schedule changes. That one possible. But to say that, okay, today you bertugas daripada rumah, doesn't make sense. So same concept goes to the private sector. Only when your business allows you to do so, you can.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings us, let's look at the poll results. So, yeah.
Okay, nice.
25% implemented work from home, 35% doing other cost-cutting measures. That's interesting. 40% still figuring it out. Okay, so hopefully today we can give you some ideas. Let's move to question number 2, which is also related to the first discussion. Now, if an employee submits an application to work from home, right, can the company then reduce the employee's salary?
The logic akal here would be there will be less expenses for you to contribute for work. Am I right? So will that also mean less gaji?
I would look at it. I would break down these 2 components here, guys. The first component I would look at is the base salary. If you are, it's important for you to identify whether you are asking the employee to work at home with the same amount of responsibility, same amount of productivity required, same amount of output. If there is a lesser job scope, then there is a possibility that you can go for a reduction in salary. But if the job expectation is the same, it's only the job location that is different, then I wouldn't say that that gives rise to a salary reduction situation. But if we break down the base salary and the allowances, the component of allowances can actually, there is a chance, in other words, there is a chance that you can consider this. Now, for example, if your allowance is tied directly to commuting, say, for example, you have a travel allowance that you provide employees, give you 100 ringgit a month for commuting to work. But now, because you are no longer commuting to work, that portion of the allowance is being removed. That's possible.
Okay.
Right? So I would say rule of thumb, look into output, whether it's the same. If it is a reduced job function, that can be negotiated. If not, salary should stay the same. Allowances, consider whether that's related to
Mhm.
traveling.
And for here, many companies have different types of allowances. So there is no one size fits all type of what type of allowances is packaged to be allowed for reduction, and another cannot. So I kind of agree with you. It all goes back to what is written in your contract and how it is written.
Correct.
Some even makes it as fixed allowances, and some are make it variables. Even in this situation, we can even consider, is it work related or is it just expenditures of work? For example, reimbursements, so on and so forth.
Yeah. It's also important for you to understand that while you may have the right, like I mentioned, certain allowances are tied to traveling and all that. It's not only that, guys. It could be meal allowances, say, for example, because now, you give a subsidized meal and now employees are eating at home. You can look into all that. But what's important is never for you to do a unilateral reduction. So if
That's
you're going
true.
to do this, then consultation is very much advised. Speak to the employees, allow them to understand. Because after all, what we are targeting is we're trying to avoid disputes.
Mm,
So in order for you to avoid disputes, you need to engage, you need to consult, you need to make sure that the employees understand where you're coming from.
agreed. Okay, that's a very clear answer. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next one. Excuse me. Is it likely that work from home or flexible work arrangement be a mandatory order, and how should employees be prepared? Phew.
COVID-19 all over again.
Yeah, the dilemma is always around. We wouldn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Like in COVID, sekejap MCO, sekejap bukan MCO, and sekejap we panic, sekejap we relax. When it comes to our situation, I think most of us are already preparing for panic mode. But when it happens, how it happens, very hard for me to say. It could even be a bombing happens tonight and tomorrow everything changes, right? And we are quite close to that situation. As much as I don't like to say it out loud, but it is what it is at the moment. Now, what's best for me to say is knowing what's going to happen, knowing what's around us, we should be prepared for us to maneuver in tough situations. So preparation here, I think it's clear. We have flexible work arrangement. We have working from home, in which continuity of business can still jalan. What you need to prepare is select both or either one at the moment. But if you tell me you don't have any, then for me, you have kind of tertinggal boat sedikit. Because when the bomb really drops, you are struggling to focus on how do you continue your business. So either way, many businesses have developed their own policies. We've seen some interesting policies that includes flexibility more for employees, some less flexibility, but also at the same time more perks. So these are the areas of business that you have to venture and look what works for you.
Maybe I chip in also based on popular questions that I get. We get a lot of questions on a daily basis, but I found one to be particularly interesting. Many companies are planning for this eventually, if it happens, right?
Okay.
So if COVID happens all over again, we need to work from home, then what do we do? Do we now retrench employees? Do we do cost cutting? And then I had one a very interesting question on force majeure.
Yes.
Right? So some people have said that, force majeure, the act of war would be considered, something within the.
Maybe let's explain a little bit what force majeure is. Me, if I can, briefly what I know, because so far this question 100 times comes during COVID. From what I can explain in layman term, it is a situation where both parties, employers and employees, did not expect and did not want it to happen. It just could be a war, it could be a natural disaster.
Yeah.
So either way, nobody is in control. Seorang ready nak kerja, seorang ready nak bagi kerja.
Yeah.
But we can't do that.
So to add a bit more context, there are many employment contracts that say that this contract will naturally be terminated in the force majeure situation. So now whether the act of war would sort of validate the termination of an employment contract without having to pay compensation and all that. But please also take note that the act of war has a definition. It
that's true.
That war needs to happen in your country. So if war is happening between US and Iran right now, that's not really war happening in Malaysia. So for you to invoke force majeure, belum sampai tahap lagi,
Betul.
right? So unless war actually happens in Malaysia, we may feel the effects of the war, but war hasn't happened in Malaysia. If war happens in Malaysia, then yes, force majeure can be activated.
We are quite blessed in our lifetime so far. We have not seen it happen.
Hopefully, we don't have to.
I hopefully don't. But from what we've read in the past, there always be a declaration by the state of a force majeure. That's when we all know it's happening. So we can't really assume, I feel this is force majeure. Not yet. It must be something official or announced by the state itself. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. This would be, can employers reduce or revise employee benefits? A follow through from what Victor has mentioned. He did mention earlier on for you to look into areas for you to improve in this situation. Now, improving those areas would also mean reducing the cost. The short answer for this is you can do changes. But the critical part of the short answer is it must be done with it cannot be done with unilateral movement. In other words, it must be consented. So every time there are reductions in the terms and conditions of employment, both employee and employer must mutually agree for it to happen. If the company forcefully put in the unilateral change on the grounds that the business needs this, we need to survive, business tak ada profit, business tak ada demand. Unfortunately, the contract is between you and the employee. So whatever is happening between the business, not really the employee's fault. I know this is quite unfair to mention, but we've seen this position happening a lot of times in court. In other words, you need to also prioritize your employees in tough situations. We can't victimize them. And unilaterally changing terms and conditions can amount to victimization, right? How do we do it? Don't worry. Sit back. There will be some questions that's coming that will be discussed on how it is being done. Some are successful measures we've seen happening during COVID and post-COVID. Some may also be unsuccessful ones. We will love to discuss it as we go along.
Let me just put it in. Like, this is my view, my personal view of it. If I were to give you a straight answer to this, can employers reduce or revise employee benefits? I would say yes. But the big question is how to do so. Right? So first and foremost, we need to understand, there is a contract. Even if your contract says, the company has the right to revise the benefits and all that, you need to understand that it is a contractual term. Right? Benefits would form an essential term, a contractual term, binding the employment relationship. So any changes, therefore, even if you have that clause in there, amounts to a variation of contract. So technically, by law, variation requires consent from both parties. So can you change? Yes. What do you do? How do you do it? You need consent. So the deal breaker and the game changer here is how do you get consent? Right. We're going to talk about it because this is a heavy subject matter that we're going to be talking about in the subsequent questions.
Yes.
But also, this has been one of the most popular areas. Even if we look back at the earlier poll, many of you said that we were doing other cost-cutting measures. I would assume that some of you have relooked into your benefits, your allowances, and maybe you have lowered certain thresholds. Maybe you have tightened it. But
cut certain budgets.
Yeah, these are the areas that are very, very popular. I had interesting questions on, can we relook into travel allowance? Because some people, I had a client who reached out and said some people travel a bit further, some people travel a bit closer, but in the past we gave a uniform travel allowance. Now we want to revise it. So one way of doing it, guys, is to be fair. Now that's what Zol mentioned. Think about your employees also. If you be fair, it's easier for you to get consent. But what does be fair mean in this context? It means that maybe we look into the benefits, we adjust it based on distance, but at the same time, we understand sometimes you may be traveling a bit further and we don't want you to lose out. We allow X amount of mileage claim, for example. So that to me is, you win some, you lose some, it's easier for you to get
Agreed.
some certain consent from employees. So short answer to this question, can you do it? Can. Popular areas that people are looking at, they're looking at medical coverage, limits that the company has provided, transport allowance, wellness benefits. This is one big area that people are looking at, gym subsidies, for example. This is a nice to have during good times, but now, if the company is going through cost cutting, can we remove some of these subsidies? Company also looking at things like
if I can structurally present it to our viewers today, can I say that if we were to do any cost reduction, The last thing we would want to touch is the salary itself. And when you mentioned earlier on, the wages, the contribution to work, anything beyond that is ancillary to it, like the membership for gym, any other entitlements and benefits. I feel that first you have to look into those areas that are not directly contributing to work done, but areas that you can reduce the budget. I know some companies would put a big budget, for example, pickleball. Last year was a big thing, right? So they say everyone can play pickle, everyone get a pedal, everyone get this, get that. It's a perk, definitely.
Yeah.
But those are also the areas that Victor has mentioned that we have to look into first, rather than straight away go for the big cut.
Correct. And this is, continuing on to our next question, actually.
Okay.
I find this to be an interesting point. We have a table on this. If we look at the next question, what are some common cost-saving strategies implemented by employers? So we've put this together based on what we've seen in the market, what we've heard from our clients. And, since you were talking about pickleball, now I feel that normally when it comes to cost-saving strategies, when we speak to employers, the first thing that always comes to their mind is, we have to cut employees.
Correct.
But when I look at it thoroughly, there is actually a flow. There is actually a pretty standard flow in how you can do this. And let's run through this.
Okay. Let's see the table here. Let's see on our slide. Great.
Okay, so I think you can firstly look into the operational aspect of things, travel expenses, entertainment, events. But now if you sign up for our conference, okay?
Those HRD claimable, not a problem.
Subscriptions, for example, or non-critical vendors. Now, if you look into this, try to think about, if you have, say, scheduled team building, it's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but if times are bad and you're thinking about cutting costs, and yet on the other hand, you need to spend 500,000 because of a team building event, or you have made orders to purchase computers for 500,000 ringgit. Those are the things which I feel can be held back for a while, can be suspended temporarily. Now, if you've done all that, those are things that you can look into pretty quickly. Then you can move into workforce efficiency, which is hiring freeze. Don't replace people who have left.
Yes.
Right? Do a bit of redeployment. Look into your ops structure to see what makes sense. Okay, cut your overtime costs. But if business is good, then then you don't have to do that, because business goods means everything runs like normal. Overtime, if business is bad, overtime can be reduced. Defer non-critical internal projects. If you have mega internal projects like you want to
renovate your pantry,
renovation, you want to have an event somewhere else, do all these mega things which requires a lot of money, those can be deferred, right? And of course, reduction of benefits if you need to. That's the area. Workforce efficiency is where you look into reduction of benefits. And then lastly, you look into workforce adjustments. And this is where you think about unpaid leave. But a lot of people start with voluntary unpaid leave situations. And you might be surprised. There are actually a lot of people who apply for voluntary unpaid leave schemes. Reduce work weeks, compress work hours, temporary shutdowns, and lastly, separation schemes. The reason I felt that I need to highlight this slide is because people often think about separation schemes first and the rest later. But I feel the better way to go about it, and it helps you legally as well, is to look at all the other expenses, then separation scheme last. Now, in the event your separation is disputed, the fact that you've done all the cost-cutting, all the other cost-cutting methods actually supports your case tremendously.
I agree. And if you look at it at a bigger picture, the narrative that you're building with your employee starts from here, where they would feel that certain reductions from the areas that you used to enjoy are no longer there. So when it's time for you to give the big news, if so it happens that we need to do some cost-cutting measurement on workforce, at least people would understand where the company is coming from, and they won't be asking, kenapa tak potong ni dulu? Kenapa tak potong tu dulu? So the narrative building, we learn a lot from COVID, because COVID hit us like a truck. We tak sempat plan pun. So now we can still plan, because we are at the early stage of things that could go worse, I would say.
Correct. Now, when you are doing these cost-cutting strategies, also leave a bit of room for future increase of costs. Things while the world is moving in one direction, cost is being looked at Now, we have also heard that the government is relooking at minimum wage, for example. They've set up a body to relook into that. So that cost might hit you in the next year also.
True.
Because I think the expiry date for this minimum wage is
3 years.
2027.
Yes, next year.
2027. So there is a likelihood that minimum wage may be revisited. So have a bit of space for those kind of items that, you can't do much about it. You just have to follow.
I think it's safe for us to say we need to have a financial plan for maybe next 24 months, 2 years, to relook into your employees' entitlements, schemes, benefits, and also probability of the law changing here. And then we would strategically align it for your top level management to know, should there be any reduction where? So you just initiate the plan accordingly. Bukan struggling to find first this, first that, then realize we should have done this first. We should have done this. I think we all were in that situation during COVID. We ourselves, individually, professionally, were scattering to understand our financial capability at times of trouble. Okay, let's move on to the next one then.
This question susah lah, Zul.
Should the company top up non-subsidized petrol costs? I heard that the diesel price is now at all-time high, right?
Yeah. Like 6 ringgit 70 something. Now, today there will be a new announcement, right? So every Wednesday they will make.
Takut, eh? So,
Forward to that.
guys, we have a poll here. If you can see on your screen, should the company top up non-subsidized petrol cost?
Because we
one
don't know
vote.
the answer, so I think it's best for you to vote lah.
Yeah. I
We'll
feel
share with you our thoughts.
Yeah, I feel this is the one hurtful pain that all countries are feeling at the moment. Oil, the price, the kekurangan oil, limitation of oil. Even in Malaysia, I heard recently in Semenanjung, some petrol stations would close certain days to ensure that there's enough for the whole week.
Yeah.
And that one, our neighboring countries, dah lama dah start. Right? So if you have the time, go through the news for you to understand what's the situation outside of the country.
Yeah.
Because those might come here soon enough.
But there's been a lot of talk around this subject matter. And specifically, right, let's throw some examples here while the votes are coming.
Okay.
Employees are pumping petrol using their own Budi 95
Okay.
subsidy, right? And now that it's been cut from 300 liters to 200 liters, they are saying that my personal consumption tak cukup. But then I pump petrol, maybe the company needs me to go to Johor Bahru or needs me to go to Penang. And that's, X amount of kilometers. So I'm spending my quota for the company. Should the company now pay me the unsubsidized petrol cost? Because the unsubsidized petrol cost is now very, very high compared to what it was just a few months ago.
Correct. So, as an employee, I do agree with that suggestion. Though. However, as an employer, I can understand the difficulty in knowing what's spent for what. We can't really control people spending on their own body, knowing it's private or professional or professional use. But it makes sense, if you ask me. Mahal lah minyak sekarang.
Okay, it's very interesting. Many of you have said yes to this. That means the company should top up lah. Meaning to say, so this is a very unorthodox situation. I kind of suspected that a lot of you will answer yes. But it's unorthodox in the sense where fuel prices are increasing. Company is looking at cutting costs. But this answer suggests companies should increase mileage claims.
There's an imbalance there.
Yeah. So a little bit susah in that context because if the company is going to increase mileage claims, now some have argued that no, we're not going to increase mileage claims because in the past we give 90 cents per kilometer or 1 ringgit per kilometer. Some companies 150 per kilometer. That is already way more than what you're pumping at the petrol stations. So I don't have a right or wrong answer. I guess this is, this question will really depend on how you want to position yourself as an employer. There's a bit of branding involved here also.
I've got an idea. It could be where you take away some perks and entitlements like your gym benefits, your club membership. At the same time, you top up here. So it may be a bigger portion that you take, but from it, you just pass a little bit for subsidy. It works well because the context of the issue now is minyak, oil. So if you are putting some effort there, it may not be a lot. It may not solve your problem.
Yeah.
But it seems to suggest company is listening, at the same time supporting. Just an idea, guys, right? We have never seen this happening before.
Yeah, so we've got one comment coming in from Claire. I saw the earlier one from Michelle. Actually, for Michelle's question, I have it in my email, in my mailbox as well. So
Okay,
we'll get to that, yeah, Michelle. But Claire's question here, she said we can top up, give petrol card for staff traveling for sales, but added with policy to encourage using public transport unless unavoidable. I think this is a good
Good
initiative.
initiative.
Maybe you can also think about, having a campaign to promote the usage of public transport. Maybe you subsidize public transport. So if you don't want to adjust your mileage, say for example, then you encourage the use of public transport and you subsidize that.
Agreed.
Right. So that's something that I think you can work the math and see whether it makes sense for your organization. I've had another idea also given to me. There are certain companies that have increased the mileage claim allowance. So let's say they were on 80 cents. Because of the petrol prices, they say we're going to move now to 1 ringgit. So that's an increase. But what they've also done is they've said that you can only claim once you exceed certain kilometers.
I see.
Right. So they're looking at the radius and they see what makes sense for them. And they say, oh, there's a 10 km radius which we feel we shouldn't cover. Anything beyond that we'll cover, but at an increased rate of 1 ringgit instead of the old 80 cents. So that's something that could work for their company. It's not an apple to apple fit to your organization. But I think what I'm encouraging you to do is really work your numbers and see what makes sense.
True.
I guess you'll be able to implement something from there.
And in KL itself, for those who are working in KL, where public transport is an option for you, you can consider that because there are a lot of discounts, rebates also provided for employees around the area. For example, the stations of MRT, KTM, something that your company may not venture before, but why not now? It could also be saving for you and the individual themselves. And if I'm not wrong, Malaysia, one of our many objectives is to get as many people to be using public transport, because that is also an indicator of a successful nation, right? A first world nation, so to say. Okay. Oh wait, talking about fuel, let's not forget about batteries, EV cars as well. I've heard a company that gives subsidies or they provide battery charging stations at the workplace as a Go Green initiative. That Go Green initiative can also help to reduce fuel consumption. But that one bukan company beli kereta untuk employee. It feels to support the lifestyle, in which I feel can help. Right? Why not? The NB is also allowing companies to apply for certain types of packages for them to install it. More so, I believe companies, private entities will also be servicing this lot because a lot of EV cars are coming in like tsunami in the country.
Right. We've got another question from Michelle.
Okay.
She said, I think what complicates matters is that we also have work from home initiatives, which will help employees to solicit work from home so as to save traveling costs.
Fair enough.
Few ways to look at this, Michelle. I think first and foremost, a lot of companies don't cover for the traveling cost to come to the workplace. And even though there is a traveling allowance, I think you would have defined your traveling allowance in your company. But traditionally, that doesn't cover coming to the office to work. Now, employees soliciting work from home, as we mentioned earlier, they look at it as a benefit. Right? Many look at it as a benefit. So, as Zul mentioned, it is still subjected to approval. Right? And if you are rejecting it, there will be reasons that you need to present for rejecting it. So, I agree with you. The trend nowadays is for employees to talk about work from home. So, the word solicit kind of makes sense to me. But I think it's just, the situation that we are in right now, the circumstances that we're in right now, and, it's become a trending thing. So if you manage it well, and you set clear policies on what's allowed, what's not allowed, then I think that should set some boundaries. Shall we move on to the
Great. Next one to the next question.
Can the company implement a pay cut? Right. So we've talked about work from home. We've talked about reducing and revising benefits. Now, big subject matter here, pay cut. So what do you think? Can the company do that?
Well, it's almost similar to the reduction portion what we discussed. I feel like the best if you can get consent, because consent is like this golden golden passage, like a golden ticket for you to do anything within the business as long as both parties agree. But definitely, it must not be something that is illegal. So reducing cost is something legal, and it is, I would say, discussable between employer and employer. But I will reiterate the fact that it cannot be done unilaterally. So should you do a pay cut, it must be with consent. And if that doesn't really help because employees never want salary to be reduced, maybe we can suggest for you to do some staggered arrangements and schemes. Like for example, a certain month, a certain portion will be taken away, or a certain week, a certain allowance will be taken away. So the pay cut may just be temporary and it is scheduled. So employees can prepare themselves to what extent the pain will be. I believe once you set the narrative right, like you start off with all the entertainment expenses or the budgeting cuts, employees will understand that this is much better rather than them losing the employment itself fully and totally. And transparency in your communication should be clear that we are not going towards retrenchment as of now, but we're also not going to discount it, or we're not going to ignore the fact that it might happen. But the way you mention it, try to reference it to what the world is facing instead to what your business. Because we'll never know profitability in business, the demand in business can change overnight. Sometimes you'll be low, sometimes you'll be high, right?
Yeah. I also want to make reference also to the Code of Conduct of Industrial Harmony.
Perfect.
I don't know whether the listeners have seen this document before. This is a document issued in 1975, quite an old piece of document, but still very much alive, still very much quoted and cited in industrial court awards. But what does it say? To me, it's like a roadmap. It provides a roadmap on what companies should do in downsizing situations or in cost-cutting situations. Let's flash the slide on.
Okay, let's see
Code
the
of
slide.
Conduct for Industrial Harmony.
All right.
Okay, first and foremost, I've just taken one paragraph from the Code of Conduct. It says when reducing a workforce, the code recommends that you do the following: limit recruitment, restrict overtime work, restrict work on a weekly rest day, so on and so forth. Why have I put this under the subject matter of pay cuts? That's because, the law looks at it in such a way where before you do something drastic, we would like for you to go through this first. Later on, if this doesn't help, then you will have to implement a pay cut. But my recommendation in terms of execution, in terms of practice, if you have to go through these steps as suggested in the Code of Conduct, is it compulsory? No, but it is recommended. Now, if you have to go through this, it means that maybe one day you might have to activate this subject matter, this topic on pay cut. Now, don't keep it a secret, guys.
Yes, agreed.
My style of managing this is really be upfront and honest and tell them, set expectations. We are trying all this. If this doesn't work, we might have to go through, more drastic actions. So if you set expectations and you communicate early, and then you have schemes on how you're doing the pay cut, I think, I wouldn't say employees would like it, but they would find
Appreciate, I would
it acceptable.
Yeah. At the end of the day, whenever you provide plans, I've seen businesses that mentions like what Victor has mentioned, we're going to try this out first. If it doesn't work, we're going to go more drastic. Now, this is something logical. However, it makes people question and have more concerns when there is no specific timeline of those actions. So my suggestion here would be, if you're trying out certain things, certain initiative, tell them in advance it is a 3 months initiative, a 2 months initiative. So they will be prepared in advance on how they're going to move on. If there were to be improvement, at least they can have lega sikit nafas kat sini. If not, they are prepared to hold their breath for a little bit longer. So we all have to work this together. What we wouldn't want is employees starts questioning, why this, why that, why don't we do this, why don't we do that? So we are no longer in an era where communication is only for top level management. We are now in an era where everybody needs to have informed options and choices. So for them, whether or not I can stick with the organization or should I leave now? That to me is also an informed choice for them. So let's just play around what works well between both parties.
Okay, shall we move on, Zul?
Yes.
We're running short of time.
Okay. Can I'll read that.
Yeah.
Can the company impose a temporary shutdown or a shorter working week with a corresponding reduction in salary? Poof. Now, shutdown in Malaysia is actually governed by the Employment Act. So there's a certain way or certain practice that you have to do before you can allow the shutdown. But if I can simplify it for our viewers, shutdown normally happens in two situations. Situation number one, where the company wants to cut operational costs, right? They would then ask employees to be away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but not all employees, a company can't simply do this without consent. It must as well be consensual by the employee. The second type of shutdown is when the company have plant closures due to breakdown. So it's not really operational cost, but maybe you are doing some changes in the company, right? So you're not losing anything, you're just making improvements. In these situations, not so long, maybe just a few days. Now, in both situations, how will the salary be treated? Consent is required when you're going to make changes to the salary, like if there's a reduction, staggered payments or staggered increments of salary over time. At the same time, there are also questions about annual leave. Can we force employees to use annual leave within this period? Answer for that is no, we cannot force employees. We can request, but we can never force. Multiple cases that we have received coming from JTK, where the JTK is of the opinion this is not possible because annual leave is employees' entitlement. If you want, for example, you can provide them paid, for example, paid structure. What do I call that? Staggered paid structures.
Yeah.
For example, 1 month you pay how much? How many percentage? Next month, how many percentage? It could be reducing or it could be increasing. I think we have done something like this in the past.
Yeah, that's very commonly found in collective agreements, actually.
Yes.
They have a temporary shutdown clause. So, like Zoe mentioned, forced leave is out of the way. Temporary shutdown, if you look at a lot of collective agreements, how they structure it is maybe first 7 days, company will pay 80%. Next 7 days, the company will pay 60%. Subsequent days, the company will pay 50% or 40% or whatever. So there is a reduction in the salary as it goes. Now, there is also the flip side where companies will start off, shut down, pay lesser for the first 1 week, 2 weeks, and then gradually moving up to 100%. Now, this is a design that, the company can work towards which one makes more sense to you. Now, my recommendation when it comes to temporary shutdown is have it in there early. Don't announce a temporary shutdown without having a clause in the contract or a clause in the handbook. If you think that having a clause in the handbook early on would help, that's what I think. Right? Then go ahead, look back at your policies and see whether you have something like that. Because if you implement a policy and it doesn't affect people, then Zoe's part on getting consent would be easy. But if it's really this very moment when you're faced with this situation and you want to get consent at this very moment, then it becomes very, very difficult. Okay, so for temporary shutdown, you can get your consent early if you need to. Figure out a way that works well for you in terms of remuneration, but it is possible, very, very possible for you to implement a cost saving with a temporary shutdown. Shorter working week, as we mentioned earlier, possible also. Again, you need to get consent to compress the work week.
Great. Okay.
Last question here.
Last question here before we go to our viewers' question. So don't forget to drop in your questions, guys. We still have time to go through it. Okay, so how can the company implement a downsizing exercise? So downsizing can come in many forms. If I can refer to the next slide here. Now, what we know as part of the company's right is to proceed with retrenchment in cases of redundancy. Right? Redundancy here means the company can provide justification that the roles and function is no longer required. It could be the function is no longer there or it's just reduced because of the business needs and demand. For retrenchment purposes, we have a set of requirements to be followed, starting from the PK forms to be submitted, the early warnings to be provided to employees, and also the retrenchment benefits to be paid for those who are entitled. And for this purpose, entitlement benefits under Employment Act only eligible for those below 4,000 and for those under the first schedule of the Employment Act. As for those above the 4,000, above the first schedule, you will have to rely to your company handbook and policies. Only if there is a clause to mention there is termination benefits, you will be entitled. If not, unfortunately, there will be no payments. And for the companies fortunate enough, there will be no obligation to pay them further. Now, that is when we talk about retrenchment. Retrenchment itself sounds scary, ya, Victor. Ramai orang takut bila dengar. Even companies, I can bet you, not many companies, I would say no company would love retrenchment. Right? They may have to just forcefully go through it to sustain the business. So as and when retrenchment were to happen, like I mentioned, there will be some requirements in practice that you need to look into. Now, Victor, we've also gone through some other alternatives.
Yeah.
That's where we don't want people to get scared, panic, nor we ourselves can't prove redundancy. But we are seeing that the sky is getting darker now, right? So what else can we do for this?
Of course, you have the VSS and the MSS. So I think most of you in this room, you are quite aware of the differences between retrenchment, VSS, and MSS. But just very quickly, retrenchment is the compulsory option, as Zol has mentioned. Voluntary separation scheme is when you put forth sort of like an offer for everybody. If they're interested, they apply. The downside to voluntary separation is your selection is quite limited. Whereas a mutual separation is where you approach the employee directly, propose a separation. Now put this in all of this in context. Which one works best? I don't think we would ever have an answer. Which one works best would depend on what's your current situation. So questions that you're going to ask is whether how much control do you want over the selection process? Right. So if you want more control, and let's just say you're the group of people that you've identified as redundant, there could be some issues with the rule of LIFO, then you know, for example, that retrenchment is not a good option for you. But you still want to, maintain an org structure. You've done an old org chart, new org chart, you've put people's name into boxes, voluntary separation scheme. You will try, you need to try to understand if the people that you are, those that are out of boxes, would they apply? What is the risk if they don't apply? Are you retaining people that you don't want to retain? Those kind of considerations come into play. So planning is absolutely essential. You need to identify what might work best for your organization and start with that. Now, the beauty about these schemes that we have in Malaysia is it's not limited to a single use, right? So you can have round one, this is what we're going to use. Round two, we're going to use something else. And round three, we're going to use something else.
Yeah.
But in all of that, also consider many, many, many other aspects, not only
this will be the last resort.
Yeah. So if you really need to go for retrenchment or MSS, consider also the impact to the people. Consider also how you're going to do it, how you're going to communicate it, when you're going to communicate it, what's the compensation you want to pay. There's a lot to be considered. So I don't think we can talk about it for 2 days, I think so. But if you have questions around restructuring schemes, let us know. We'll try to get to it as soon as possible. Otherwise, we can connect with you offline for a separate discussion on this.
If I can add a little bit there, just like how I recommended, at this point, you should have plan A or plan B for work from home and flexible work arrangement in your company. You should also have plan A, plan B, plan C, which is retrenchment, MSS, VSS. If your company have to go through it, how you're going to run it. The simulation can start today because your budgeting, your planning of your period, what call it? Kewajipan, masa wajib for you to submit the documents, so on and so forth, can happen now already. The timelines, sorry, that slipped my mind. Yeah, so for this, I would also say then the kind of position that you should carry when it comes to retrenchment, VSS and MSS can also differ. Like for example, what Victor mentioned, at this early stage, we can start off with VSS, which means you don't know who to let go. You're not going to select anybody, but you're offering to your employees who at this point would want to leave the organization and move on with your life. Then you go to MSS, where you may have selected some areas of the business that you want to reduce. If there's nobody or it's not successful there, then you can go for retrenchment. People would also understand that you've tried at least from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. Some businesses would think, if I've already done VSS, I cannot do MSS, I cannot do retrenchment. That's wrong. You can actually do that periodically.
Yep.
Okay.
I think before we get into Q&A, I want to add a counterbalance to our presentation, because I feel our presentation has been quite heavy in terms of, you know, cutting this, cutting that, cutting people, cutting benefits, cutting money. Now, if there's companies out there who's not facing, you know, a severe financial situation, they're not financially stressed. There are a lot of our clients who reach out to us and say, we need to help our employees. We want to take some steps to assist them in this difficult situation. So, you know, what are some examples that you think companies can put in place?
Say, for instance, the business is doing well, and your employees, you very much appreciate them because how they contribute in these tough times. But personally, maybe the people around them is not doing so well. Some of the family members are losing jobs, so on and so forth. If you are in the right capacity and you can, why don't you offer emergency loans to your employees? Some funds to support them or sustain emergency situations. Now, there will be some processes, structures that you can put in place on the repayment, so on and so forth. If you're wondering, can businesses give loans? We can actually under Section 24. It is what we call as an advancement of salary. There are also some procedures of the repayment. For example, you can't ask 100% of what is being given. The max you can get from a person's salary is 50% of that particular month. So you just work out the balance, how much that person borrowed and how many months is the payout. Okay, this is an example if your business is doing cow during this time.
Cost of living allowance is something I'd like to highlight also. Cost of living allowance is quite a popular thing in the past. I think 1960s, 1970s, there's been a lot of this. There's also been a lot of cases on cost of living allowance. And more particularly whether they would be read as part of the meaning of wages. A lot of disputes around there, not for today, but issuing a temporary cost of living allowance or once-off cash assistance is quite a popular thing. Many companies are doing that. Some
How
companies,
much would normally be?
on a monthly, you know, it can be 100 ringgit a month or 200 ringgit a month. That's sort of like the popular figure.
Understand.
I've also seen a lot of companies doing meal vouchers, you know, supporting their employees, giving makan vouchers, giving meal vouchers, you know, for groceries purchase. And one interesting one, which I like a lot, is companies are now starting to look into financial literacy workshops.
Oh, that's great.
So
Teaching employees.
teaching employees how to manage your funds, how to manage your budget, how to be a bit more prudent in this difficult time. So I think that's an area, that's a very good area that companies can look at.
And I think one of the big discussions we have during COVID until today are about investments. Maybe this is not by company, but individually. Invest dalam emas lah, unit trust lah, insurance lah, here, there. I feel it's about time for company to provide this information to your employees so that at the end of the day, when the business prosper, even the employees personally would prosper as well. Because nowadays, a lot of people bankrupt young age. A lot of masalah do it at the very early stages of life.
But not only that, you know, so it's whether, you know, I've overcommitted myself, I've bought too many cars.
That's true, that's true.
Not spend my money wisely, maybe plan too many holidays.
True.
These are the things that employees can revisit and see how they can be, you know, a bit smarter with their finances. I would assume that if employees are, you know, pulling through this period without much of a struggle, companies can also maintain, and then, you know, when times are better, everybody can reap the benefits.
Correct. And if I can add, it's also a good time for businesses to invest in employees upskilling. So there are a lot of programs that we see online for people to get certified for. A lot of universities are now providing that. So maybe as a business, you would want people to be more talented, more upskilled. Why don't you look into who you already have and you leverage them from there? Right? HRD also, if I'm not wrong, the funds are not really disturbed there. You can use it for our conference, for example. Or at the same time, you can send your employees for the trainings by a lot of service providers.
Okay.
Let's look into the questions we have so far.
Let's do the Q&A. There's a bit of a thunderstorm here, guys, so I hope that's not affecting our microphones.
Okay.
Okay, Michelle, the EP ruling, whether that would amount to force majeure. So unfortunately, I don't think the change of law would amount to force majeure in this situation. So if, let's say, you need to send foreigners home because of a change in the law, then the other provisions in the law would still be applicable. So like I mentioned, I was halfway through discussing this with Michelle, and I have an email to reply. I'll send it to you on this. Yeah, Michelle.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much. Next, can I have? I think this is done. Oh, Claire Lim. In my opinion, pay cut is one of approach when company is having financial issues for short term overcome this. Okay. Of course, if it doesn't help, no choice, company have to do retrenchment. I totally agree. What the court likes to see is retrenchment as the last resort. It's not the first thing or first option used by the company. So pay cuts and all other things that mentioned by us in today's session would be a good option for you. Right? The more you can show that you've tried to avoid retrenchment, the better. Retrenchment is the better. Okay, next, can we have, this is from Fun. Can employer encourage employee to utilize their subsidy entitlement and claim for mileage?
So my answer is the law doesn't stop you from doing it.
I love the term encourage here.
Yeah, but you might get employees who, are telling you that they're not having enough. What if in future the subsidy is cut from 200 to 100?
Correct.
So I think this is an area that you need to look at. At the moment, to answer your question, the law doesn't stop you. You can encourage employees to use their entitlement and claim for mileage. But I think to create a balance, your mileage claim needs to be something that is, something that can match the fuel prices out there. Because if your mileage claim is low, then I think it's only a matter of time you want employees being unhappy with this policy.
Agreed. Okay. Excuse me.
Okay, Li Chu, one of the main challenges of implementing work from home is the risk of employees become uncontactable during working hours, creating communication gaps and delays. This may be caused by poor discipline, lack of supervision, and in addition, productivity often declines in remote environment as employees may face distractions at home, weaker time management, and reduced accountability. So,
Employer's nightmare here.
yeah, that sounds like a statement, Li Chu. So I'm just going to guess the question here. Question here is, give pun salah, don't give pun salah, right? So what do we do under this situation? You are going to get multiple schools of thoughts here. For a fact, I can testify that a lot of companies do a complete remote environment and employees are still able to perform. So it's a matter of tracking the output and not tracking the behavior and the time. Right? So if employees become uncontactable, we have to ask why. If we believe that work from home is the way to go, I am very, very sure that there are ways that you can achieve this. Now, there are also companies that tried work from home and they say, no, in our environment, this is never going to work. We are recalling employees back to the office. I think we've also seen in the news a lot of companies say this is not working for us.
Yes.
Back to the office. So really, it's a matter of if you want it and if you believe that this is the idea, then work on it. The more you work on it, the more holes you fill. Across a matter of 1 to 2 years, I'm sure you will improve.
Yeah.
But if you're expecting to implement a work from home and everything stays the same, no productivity is dropped, I don't think it's possible. I think it's something that requires constant evaluation.
Constant, yeah, constant evolution, even the way we do things. And I have seen as well where clients have half of those who have never been in the remote working don't prefer remote working. Another half, freshly grad employees, are already expecting this work from home.
Yeah.
So when they start working and you see productivity, that productivity comes from them working remotely. So I believe for your business, that policy that we've mentioned should be flexible enough to cater both types of generations or types of employees.
So Li Chu, your concern is actually a very valid concern, and that's probably why the government has also introduced this GPS tracker.
Yeah, that's for me.
The Spot Me program. Now, I feel that if you have employees who have applied for work from home, but you are having these concerns, it is completely fine for you to have a conditional approval. That means, you lay down what's important, and if the employee fails to fulfill, then the work from home approval is revoked. The employee needs to come back to work.
Agreed.
It's perfectly fine to do that.
Yeah. And together with this, you can also have your performance management structures to be extended for those outputs for remote employees, right? And when I say this, it must be looked into and reviewed, because you cannot expect the type of output or the type of contribution by the employees similar to when they are in the office. There will be some sort of difference, but what we need to maintain is the quality of work. All right, next. Employer cannot impose salary reduction until get consent from employee, right? What is other option for employer to impose this if they don't get the consent? Retrenchment. That's the last resort, and I repeat this for the fourth time. That's not the first option we should have. I believe it's more of how we get people to understand why it's happening will be a better way of looking at this.
Yeah.
Because it's either A or B at this point. No consent, you cannot work without it.
I think Diana, if I get your question right, you're coming from the point of view where employees are not going to consent. Can I just langgar and bulldoze my way through? And what are the implications if I do so? Few ways to look at it. You can also think about this as an alternative to retrenchment. That means I'm doing the pay cut because I don't want to go to the extent of retrenchment. Then if employees don't agree, I got no choice but to retrench. So you langgar, set that across. Now, if you do that, bukan tak boleh, but you need to be prepared that there will be disputes. Now, in the event you need to get to that stage, then maybe you need to open up an option, or maybe you need to socialize with the employees that there's no way the company can pull through anymore. We're facing severe losses. We have to do this option 1, pay cuts, or option 2, retrench. If you don't agree to this, we'll have to embark on the retrenchment exercise. I don't see that as a threat. That's just reality if you have your facts to back that up. So is it possible? Yes, but it's difficult, and you're going to face a lot of backlash. So that's my answer. Yeah.
Okay, I have this dilemma, Victor. I'm a champion of informed choice, which means I feel that whatever decisions, whether it's simple or tough, it will be done successfully if both parties understands and move forward together with it. So, in getting informed choice, we would normally involve them in the decision-making process. My question, is it a good idea to have surveys given to employees? Like, for example, you mentioned pay cut, retrenchment, or cut this, cut that. Is it a good thing for us to ask employees' opinion?
I probably wouldn't do that.
Why so? Yeah.
Because it's a lot of bad news here, right? So it's like, if I'm the employer, I probably won't even want to
Vote.
vote for anything, but I would socialize.
Okay.
I don't think that everybody can be involved in this sort of decision making, but I would socialize it to the extent where, I'm trying to convince people to understand where I'm coming from. So more importantly, for me, it would be how sincere I am in communicating transparently with my employees. If I'm sincere about the fact that we're not doing well, we are facing losses, this is what we need to do, or this is what we have done, then I think I can get many people to stand along with me to understand where I'm coming from. And so for me, most pushbacks will happen when they are not, like you say, from decisions, from choices. But if employees don't see it coming, that's where disputes will happen.
Fair
Now,
enough.
if the boss buys a new house, buys a new car, but then retrench people, those are the things that people will talk about.
Sure.
But if you see your boss have to sell this, sell that, sell this land, sell the factory, sell everything, and then coming to tell you that, oh look, we're not doing so well, or share market prices have dropped, we are suffering, then employees would naturally be on that same boat. And that's where I want them to be before any major communications are done.
Okay, that's a good explanation. Let's move on to the next one. Azman Aziz. Sorry, I rephrase. Okay, there was an earlier question. For employees earning below 4,000, can public holiday rest day work be replaced instead of paying triple rate, double rate on a temporary basis? Example, 2 to 3 months until operations stabilize. My answer for this would be no, because the entitlements for overtime, entitlements for public holiday and rest day is already provided for under the law. If you want to play around with it, for example, public holiday, there are 11 yang wajib diberi. The 5 compulsory, by hook or by crook, if they work on those days, they need to get paid the rates. Whereas the others, the 6 balance, you can play around for it to be transferred to a different date. That one, yes, you can. For rest day, if we look into the definition of rest day, it is actually 1 day per week. You can change those days into different dates where you require them to work. So you don't have to pay the rates for the rest day. Just within the week, you make the changes. But for you to make this, you can't do this. Tomorrow you change to it, and then esok you bagi tahu. Tak boleh. It must be at least 1 month before the calendar date for it to be informed of the schedule. That's my take on this. What do you think, Victor?
I think for public holiday, I'm going to take it's the same answer, guys, that I'm going to give. For public holiday, boleh, but only for the non-replaceable public holidays. That means the remaining public holidays. The 5 tak boleh lah. For rest day, can you replace? The answer is no. By the act, you can't do that. But there is a provision in the Employment Act where if you need to restructure the rest days. So, for example, instead of having 1 rest day per week, you push 4 days in a row. That means you work 26 days and then have 4 days of rest day.
Excuse me.
If you want to do that kind of a scheme, you can do so, but that requires approval from the JTK. So you need to write in, you need to apply and get consent, get approval from the JTK before you can implement so. But to replace the rest day within the week itself, I don't think that's a problem. Yeah, so instead of having a Monday rest day, you change to Wednesday rest day. That one, no problem.
But what you cannot do for sure is in that 7 days of a week, no rest day. If a person is given rest day, but they still have to work, not a problem, but pay them the rest day rate. But what we want here is we don't want to pay the rest day rate. Unfortunately, then you can only play around within that week itself, like what Victor has mentioned. Okay.
That's all. I think before we go, we want to do a bit of sales here. Let me do this.
Yes, please.
I think since we have a fair bit of listeners here, we are having our first conference, first time ever. But it's not the first time ever we are hosting, actually. It's first time ever under our company, E2 Workforce Consulting. For those of you who have known us from our past, we've organized many conferences before. We are very, very excited to have our inaugural conference on the 11th to 13th of May at the Le Meridian Hotel Jaya Hotel. So for those of you not familiar, this is the Paradigm Mall at Kelana Jaya. Next to it is the Meridian Hotel. We have put in a lot of effort, guys, and I'm calling for your support. I really hope if you have some time, you have some funds, you have some budget, please come and join us, support our cause, because we are really looking forward to do very interesting things for all our clients. So if you need to look out the flyer and who's speaking and what kind of topics have we offered, look into the link here, e2consulting.com.my/conference. If you are keen to know more about industrial relations, I think we've put on quite a stellar lineup. There are a lot of lawyers who will be discussing many topics on employment law, but we've also added the fun element with anti-HR. We've also added the networking element because there will be activities during event day, which hopefully, you get to meet people and you get to mingle around with people. So we're looking forward to 3 fun days of the conference. Long story short, please register. Thank you very much.
If I can add here, instead of just putting out a great show in which I can testify what we've been doing in the past few years, instead of just a great show, what we want also is to create a strong community. Because as and when the community doesn't go away, it doesn't change. It just needs to get stronger and stronger. So this is our first ever conference and first ever community built up for our connections among us. Feel free to join us. And I wouldn't say feel free, like please join us so that you won't be missing out for what we're going to explore and do with our community in the long term.
Yep.
Right. With that, thank you very much for joining in. I hope we are able to provide you some information and answers based on the way we provided our questions today. If there's anything more that you would like to inquire, feel free to drop in your queries into our consulting email. We will be able to answer it personally. And if you would like to speak to any of us, myself or Victor or any of our consultants, reach out. We are more than happy to assist. With that, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.